They played you, lied to your face, twisted your kindness and called your boundaries a problem. You stayed longer than you should have, because you loved deeper than they ever could. But this isn't about revenge. It's about returning to your mind, your power, your peace. This is the quiet comeback. No screaming, no breakdown, just healing that speaks for itself. If you've ever been gaslit, discarded, overlooked, or underestimated, this is for you. This is where you stop performing and start remembering who you are. Welcome back. Your mental clapback begins here. They played you. Here's how to clap back mentally. Written and published by Stoic Guardian. Chapter 1. The moment you realized it was a game. There's a moment, not always loud, not always final, when something inside you quietly shifts. A moment when the way they spoke to you no longer feels clever, it feels calculated. When the kindness begins to feel more like control. When the praise comes with a hook. And suddenly it hits you. This wasn't connection, this was a setup. It's not always easy to explain. It may have looked like affection, like partnership, like friendship, but deep down, your body always knew something was off. And now that knowing has come forward, not to hurt you, but to wake you. You weren't being seen, you were being played. Not in the dramatic, revenge movie kind of way, in the subtle, manipulative way that leaves you questioning yourself. But this isn't about staying in that pain. This is about what happens next. About what it means to reclaim your mind, not through chaos, but through calm. Because the real clapback, it's not a reaction, it's reprogramming. And it begins here. You may feel angry, numb, embarrassed, like you should have seen it sooner. But let me tell you, clarity doesn't come late. It comes when you're ready. Ready to see what your body already sensed. Ready to move from pattern to power. And that readiness isn't loud, it's rooted. You don't need to scream to heal. You don't need revenge to rise. What you need is to pause, to soften, to sit with the truth that you didn't lose the game. They just underestimated your ability to wake up. That moment of realization, that was you rising. Not to get even, but to get clear. You don't need to play back. You just need to stop participating. And that doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. The game only works when you forget who you are. But now, you remember. And remembering is everything. So before we go any further, breathe. You are not broken for being played. You are not naive for wanting to believe the best. You are open, honest, hopeful. That's not weakness, that's capacity. And now, with all that same capacity, you get to rebuild differently. Not with walls, but with wisdom. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. You don't have to fight your way out. You just have to see clearly. Because once you see it for what it was, once you name it, once you stop spinning the story into something softer than it was, you're already out. Not physically, maybe, but mentally. And mental departure is the first exit. It's what allows you to leave emotionally, energetically, spiritually. So here's your beginning. You see it now, you feel it now. And from this point on, you choose yourself, not to get back at them, but to finally come back to you. I no longer explain why I felt what I felt. I trust what I saw. I honor what I sensed. And I reclaim my power, not with noise, but with clarity. Chapter 2. Why betrayal feels like a mirror. Betrayal feels like a collapse, not just of trust, but of identity. It breaks something deeper than expectation. It cracks the image you held of who they were. And maybe who you were too. Because when someone lies, manipulates, deceives, or uses you, it doesn't just hurt, it confuses. You start asking questions that ache. Was any of it real? How did I not see this? What does this say about me? But here's the deeper truth beneath betrayal. It acts like a mirror. It doesn't just show you them, it reflects you. Not in blame, but in invitation. It reflects where your boundaries were thin, where your hope outran your discernment, where your longing to be loved made you override your own voice. That's not a flaw. That's where your healing wants to begin. The pain isn't just about what happened, it's about what it activates. It wakes something up inside you that can no longer stay silent. You didn't betray yourself on purpose. You adapted. You survived. You gave benefit of the doubt because you wanted to believe. You stayed because your body remembered what abandonment felt like. You forgave too quickly because conflict used to mean danger. You gave more than they asked for because giving was how you learned to feel valuable. And they took. Some with charm, some with guilt, some with silence. And when they left or lied or broke what you thought was safe, they didn't just take your trust, they triggered your blueprint, that internal script that says, don't be too much, stay agreeable, be lovable, be less. So no, the betrayal wasn't just about them. It cracked open a deeper story, and now you get to rewrite it. Not with rage, with reclamation, with the soft decision to no longer confuse pain for connection, to no longer silence your gut to keep the peace. The mirror of betrayal doesn't just reflect the wounds. It reveals your wisdom. You start to see how much you knew, how early you felt the shift, the red flag, the gut pull. But back then, you didn't trust it. You were taught to trust others over yourself, to keep the relationship intact even if it meant tearing yourself apart. That's what betrayal exposes, the places where you outsourced your authority, where you trusted their version of you more than your own. But now you see. You don't flinch at your sensitivity anymore. You honor it. You no longer shrink to make the other person seem bigger. You stand in your center, even if your voice shakes. That's how the mirror becomes medicine. Not because it looks pretty, but because it reveals the exact place where healing wants to grow roots. It's okay to feel grief, to mourn what could have been, to feel waves of sadness, rage, and even regret, but don't stay there. Let those emotions move through you, not become you, because once the tears pass, something deeper emerges. A sense of self-respect that was dormant, a voice that says, never again. A quiet vow, I will never abandon myself to feel chosen. That's the new standard, not built on bitterness, but built on clarity. You may have been played, but you are no longer playing small. You are no longer confused. You are no longer contorting yourself to make dysfunction feel like home. That's the power of the mirror. It doesn't just show you what hurt, it shows you who you're becoming. Someone who doesn't chase closure, someone who doesn't need to be understood to trust what they feel, someone who sees clearly and still chooses peace. So take this moment, this breath, this space, and thank the mirror. Not for what they did, but for what it revealed. You are not broken because you were betrayed. You are not foolish because you didn't see it all sooner. You are simply awake now, and that awareness is everything. You are not becoming colder, you are becoming clearer. And that clarity will change how you move, how you speak, how you choose. Let betrayal be the last time you silence your knowing. Let it be the catalyst that called you home to yourself. Because the mirror doesn't just reflect pain, it reflects power. And from this point forward, that's what you rise with. I no longer fear the mirror. I trust what I see. I no longer carry blame. I carry clarity. I rise not from anger, but from truth. Chapter 3. The illusion of being chosen. There's something deeply intoxicating about being chosen. It can feel like validation, like arrival, like finally being seen after years of invisibility. When someone picks you, romantically, professionally, socially, it hits that ancient ache. Maybe I'm finally enough. And so you lean in, you soften, you open. You begin to orient your worth around their attention. But beneath the sweetness of being chosen lives a bitter truth. Not all invitations are rooted in respect. Some are rooted in convenience, in control, in ego. And yet, when you've been trained to equate attention with value, you don't always question it. You don't ask, do I even want this? You're too caught in the high of being selected. But here's what they don't tell you. Being chosen doesn't mean being cherished. And when the illusion fades, it leaves behind a deeper question. Why was I waiting to be picked in the first place? That illusion is seductive because it mirrors childhood scripts. Maybe you were praised when you performed, loved when you were easy, chosen when you stayed small. So now, when someone chooses you, it feels like safety, like worth. But it's not real safety. It's conditional belonging. And the cost of conditional belonging is always the same: self-abandonment. You start saying yes before checking in with yourself. You tolerate inconsistencies because you don't want to lose the seat at the table. You lower your standards because your inner child still whispers, "Don't be too much, just be grateful they picked you." But now, you're waking up. You're starting to feel the difference between connection and transaction, between chemistry and clarity, between being chosen and being valued. And once you feel that difference, the illusion can't hold. There's grief in letting go of the need to be chosen, because for so long that chase gave you something to hold on to. It gave you a role, a purpose. But chasing worth outside of yourself is a race that never ends. Even when you win, you lose, because your sense of self becomes tied to someone else's preference. That's not love. That's dependency. That's the system working exactly as it was designed, to keep you distracted, depleted, and disconnected from your own authority. But now you know better. Now you know that you get to choose you, that your worth doesn't rise and fall based on someone else's attention span, that the right relationships don't start with, "Please pick me." They start with, "I already belong to myself. Do you meet me here?" Reclaiming your power means you stop chasing seats at tables where you are only conditionally welcomed. It means you stop craving roles that require you to contort. You stop mistaking breadcrumbs for banquets. And you stop being flattered by low-effort invitations. Because choosing yourself doesn't mean isolating. It means filtering. It means you pause and ask, do I feel safe here? Do I feel respected here? Do I feel seen here? Not just for what I give, but for who I am when I'm not performing. And if the answer is no, you don't chase, you don't beg, you bow out, quietly, cleanly. Because being chosen is not the win. Being true to yourself is. And when you choose you first, the illusion of being picked loses its grip completely. So today, breathe this truth into your body. I no longer wait to be chosen. I am already enough. Already whole. Already worthy of spaces that don't ask me to disappear. I release the need to be liked in exchange for the commitment to be real. And from that commitment, everything begins to change. The people you attract, the way you move, the decisions you make. You stop performing and start embodying. You stop proving and start protecting. And in that grounded place, you no longer see being chosen as a finish line. You see it for what it was. A distraction, a distortion, a detour away from the truth you now live every day. You don't need to be picked to be powerful. You already are. I no longer chase validation. I no longer shrink to be selected. I choose myself fully, and I trust that what's real will meet me in that truth. Chapter 4. What manipulators teach you about yourself. It's easy to villainize the manipulator, to see them as the problem, to point to their tactics, their charm, their silence, their guilt trips. And yes, those patterns are real. They're harmful. But if you stay in blame too long, you miss the mirror. Because the deeper work is not just in identifying who manipulated you, It's in gently asking, what part of me let that in? Not as self-blame, but as self-inquiry. Because manipulators don't always find the weakest parts of you. Often they find the parts of you that are still waiting to be validated. The parts that want to be needed. The parts that equate sacrifice with love. The parts that confuse attention for care. And instead of just resenting them, you learn. You learn what part of you still thought love had to be earned through loyalty that hurts. You learn what part of you didn't yet know how to say no. Manipulation teaches you about your boundaries, about the difference between guilt and guidance, between pressure and presence, between intimacy and enmeshment. When someone manipulates, they don't just distort the truth, they test your inner compass. And the moments you gave in, the moments you over-explained, the moments you stayed silent just to avoid tension, those weren't failures. They were data, emotional feedback, evidence of where your healing still lives, evidence of what needs strengthening. You're not weak for being manipulated. You're human. You wanted connection. You wanted to be understood. You wanted harmony. And sometimes people use those longings against you. But once you see it, really see it, not only do you stop falling for it, you stop needing what they were offering. Because what they offer only works when there's an ache to exploit, and you're learning now how to soothe that ache yourself. The manipulator may have spoken in flattery, but you can now tell when words aren't backed by actions. They may have pulled away when you had needs, but now you see how that withdrawal was a form of control. They may have turned everything around on you, but now you recognize gaslighting for what it is, a tactic, not a truth. The most painful part of dealing with manipulators is not what they said, it's how much you questioned yourself after. But that self-doubt is starting to shrink, because every time you notice the pattern, every time you name it, every time you stop trying to prove yourself to someone who profits off your confusion, you heal. You strengthen your inner voice, and that voice becomes louder than their scripts. It tells you when to walk away, when to pause, when to say, "That's not mine to carry." That voice is your freedom. Manipulators don't win when they fool you once, they win when they convince you to keep doubting your truth. But your truth is coming back online, slowly, clearly, strongly. You're learning to see the signs early, to name the pattern quickly, to no longer wait for evidence that harms you just to prove what your gut already knew. That's the power they didn't count on, that you'd grow stronger through the pain, that you'd stop performing and start protecting, that you'd stop begging to be understood and start honoring your own understanding. This is the evolution. Not that you'll never meet manipulators again, but that they'll no longer feel like home. You'll no longer tolerate charm that's not rooted in care, attention that's not followed by consistency, apologies that aren't backed by change. That's how you win, not through revenge, but through refusal. So today, say this to yourself gently. I'm not ashamed that I was manipulated. I'm proud that I'm no longer available for it. I no longer question my instincts just to stay liked. I no longer explain my boundaries just to avoid abandonment. I no longer confuse tension with intimacy. Manipulation showed me where I needed to come home to myself, and I did. I am. With every decision, I honor my mind is clear. My center is strong. My voice is my compass. And when someone tries to pull me out of that center, I don't react. I reclaim. That is the real clapback. That is the quiet, powerful rise. That is the moment you stop being a target and start becoming untouchable. I am no longer a match for manipulation. I trust my clarity. I walk in calm power. I don't fight to be heard. I choose to stay rooted in truth. Chapter 5. No, you weren't too sensitive. You were aware. They told you that you were too sensitive, too emotional, too reactive, that you took things personally, that you overthought everything, that you were too much for your own good. And for a long time you believed them, so you tried to harden, to shrink, to edit yourself. You tried to take up less space, ask fewer questions, stop making everything a big deal. But here's what you were never told. Your sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was awareness. It was your system recognizing imbalance. It was your nervous system responding to unspoken tension. It was your body feeling what wasn't being said. That's not fragility, that's perception. You didn't make things bigger than they were. You simply noticed things others ignored. And instead of being praised for that gift, you were punished for it. But now, we reclaim it. Because your sensitivity is not a flaw, it's your compass. And it never stopped working. You were just taught to mute it. There's a difference between reacting from trauma and responding from truth. And yes, sometimes the lines blur. But your sensitivity was never about drama. It was about depth. You felt things early. The shift in tone, the silence in a conversation, the inconsistency between someone's words and their energy. You noticed when someone smiled with their mouth but not their eyes. And while others called it paranoia, your body called it data. You weren't creating conflict. You were detecting disconnect. And that skill, when nurtured instead of shamed, becomes one of your greatest sources of power. Because awareness allows you to move wisely, to choose cleanly, to protect your peace before it's disturbed. And now that you're no longer gaslighting yourself out of your knowing, you begin to feel something sacred, safety within yourself, the kind that doesn't need proof to be valid. For years you internalized the message that being less reactive would make you easier to love, so you minimized discomfort. You ignored red flags. You told yourself, maybe I'm just being overly sensitive. And each time you did, you silenced the very part of you that was trying to save you. But now, you're choosing a new pattern. One where your sensitivity is honored, not hidden. You start listening to that quiet discomfort. You pay attention to what feels off. You no longer rush to explain it away. Because here's the truth. Awareness doesn't always come with evidence. Sometimes it's just a feeling, an instinct, a knowing that arrives before logic. And that knowing, it's never wrong. Even if you can't prove it. Even if it's others try to talk you out of it. Even if it's inconvenient. Your awareness is not a burden, it's a boundary, and it deserves to be trusted. When you reclaim your awareness, you stop apologizing for your sensitivity in conversations, in relationships, in rooms where everyone else seems fine while your body screams otherwise. You start honoring your cues. You no longer need conflict to escalate before you set a boundary. You don't need a breakdown to justify rest. You notice early and you act early. That's emotional maturity. That's nervous system intelligence. That's you becoming your own protector, not out of fear but out of reverence, because once you see your sensitivity as a strength, you stop giving it away. You stop explaining your intuition to people committed to misunderstanding it. You stop waiting for permission to trust yourself, and in that decision, you build a life that feels safe, not because it's perfect, but because you are paying attention. So today, whisper this back to yourself. I was never too sensitive. I was aware. I now listen to my body, my breath, my inner signals. I no longer override my knowing to stay likable. I trust my perception. I protect my energy, and I honor my emotional truth without delay. I don't need permission to trust my awareness. I just need presence. And from that presence, I rise. Not by reacting, not by panicking, but by pausing. And in that pause, I hear the voice that was never broken, only buried. The voice that always knew, I don't need to be less sensitive. I just need to stop apologizing for what I feel. I was never too sensitive. I was awake. I trust my perception. I protect my peace. And I move with the wisdom that was always within me. Chapter 6. Mental Checkmate. When you stop explaining, there comes a moment in your healing where you stop explaining. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but because you finally understand your peace doesn't need to be justified. You no longer feel the need to over-express yourself to people who mishear you on purpose. You no longer break yourself open trying to make someone understand a boundary they were never going to respect anyway. That moment, that's mental checkmate. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's still. It's the inner switch where you realize, I don't owe you an essay for my no. I don't owe you proof that my truth is valid. You don't need to argue anymore, because the argument was never the point. The point was to drain you, to keep you spinning, to keep you doubting. But you don't spin anymore, you don't beg to be seen. You see yourself, and that's enough. When you stop explaining, something powerful happens inside your nervous system. You stop leaking energy. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop writing paragraphs you'll never send. Because you begin to understand that some people don't lack understanding, they lack accountability. And explaining yourself to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you isn't clarity, it's self-abandonment. You can feel the moment now. When your body wants to explain, to soften, to earn their approval back. And instead, you pause. You breathe. You say less. Maybe nothing at all. Not out of spite, but out of sovereignty. You are no longer trying to be palatable. You are practicing presence. And that presence, it becomes your boundary. It becomes your clapback. Not a roar, a refusal. This refusal doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. And clarity is uncomfortable for people who depended on your confusion. When you were unclear, you were more controllable, more likely to second-guess, more likely to comply. But now, you see the game. You see how they twist your words, how they make their confusion your responsibility, how they turn your reaction into the problem, and you stop playing. That's checkmate, not because you won, but because you left the board. You stopped trying to get through to someone who was invested in not getting it. You stopped explaining your feelings to people who never ask how you feel. You stopped justifying your growth to people who preferred you small. And when you do that, you create a new kind of peace. The kind that doesn't need to be proven. The kind that speaks in silence. You'll still feel the urge to explain. That's natural, especially if you were raised in systems where love came with performance, where saying no required a reason, where boundaries made you feel guilty. But now you know the difference between a relationship that deserves understanding and a situation that just wants control. And you act accordingly. You spend less time crafting explanations, more time listening to your body. You let your decisions stand on their own. You let people misunderstand you, and you let them. That's freedom, because you're no longer trying to manage how others feel about your truth. You're just living it, walking it, speaking it when necessary, protecting it always. And that silent protection, that's the win. That's mental sovereignty. That's the end of chasing closure, the end of begging to be seen, the end of performing your pain for people who benefit from your confusion. So today, remind yourself gently, I no longer explain what was never mine to prove. I am no longer a participant in conversations designed to erode my clarity. I do not debate my intuition. I do not translate my truth for those who weaponize my honesty. I protect my peace with presence, not with paragraphs. My silence is not weakness, it is a full sentence. And that sentence says, I'm done proving, I'm done pleading, I'm done explaining myself to people who were never listening. That's not anger, that's alignment, that's not pride, that's protection. And as you step forward from this place of calm refusal, you carry a truth that needs no defense. I trust myself, and that's the only explanation I need. I don't explain my boundaries, I don't debate my truth. I protect my peace through presence, not performance. My silence is strength, and I stand in it fully. Chapter 7. The clapback isn't loud, it's emotional distance. They expected you to scream, to plead, to react. That's the response they trained you for. Because as long as you're loud, you're still engaged. You're still in the loop, still explaining, still responding. But when you go silent, not as a freeze, but as a choice, it disrupts the entire pattern, because now your power doesn't live in how loudly you clap back. It lives in how deeply you detach. That emotional distance, that's the real shift. That's the moment when they realize you're gone. Not physically maybe, but energetically, emotionally, spiritually. The version of you who tolerated, explained, internalized, it doesn't live here anymore. And the new version? She doesn't argue. She doesn't rush to be understood. She doesn't trade her peace for proximity. She just leaves, quietly, and in that quiet, the loudest message is delivered. Emotional distance is not the same as coldness. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. It's knowing the difference between connection and access. Just because someone wants to speak to you doesn't mean they deserve to reach you. Just because someone wants forgiveness doesn't mean they're entitled to your softness. That's what emotional distance teaches you. It reclaims the space between presence and permission. You may still be in the same room, you may still share a conversation, but the way you let their words affect your inner world, that changes completely. You stop inviting their chaos into your nervous system. You stop absorbing their energy like it's your job to fix them. And the beauty of this distance? You don't need them to understand it. You only need to hold it. You'll feel it the moment it happens. The moment their old tactics no longer land. The guilt trip doesn't work. The compliment feels flat. The manipulation makes you blink, but not bend. You might smile, nod, even say, "I hear you," but inside, you're still, rooted, unshaken. That's not numbness, it's discernment. You've learned to see the difference between emotion and obligation. You've learned to stop equating emotional intensity with intimacy, and that learning didn't come easy. It came through heartbreak, through gaslighting, through all the moments you stayed too long, said too much, gave too deeply. And now, you've finally arrived at a new threshold, a new kind of power, one that doesn't yell or fight or explain, one that simply walks away without the need to slam the door. This emotional distance will confuse them. It won't match the version of you they were used to, the version who overgave, who over-apologized, who made peace at the cost of her presence. But don't shrink, don't second-guess. Their confusion is not your cue to come closer, it's confirmation that your boundary is working. And the more you stay in that distance, the more you'll notice how calm your nervous system feels, how much energy you preserve, how many situations no longer spiral. You're not disconnected, you're protected. You're not bitter, you're boundaried. And from that place, you don't have to clap back with words. Your energy does it for you. Your absence, your peace, your stillness. It all becomes a signal. I've reclaimed myself. And that means you no longer get to play here. So today, settle into this truth. I don't need to react to reclaim my power. I create emotional distance where chaos once lived. I no longer let access be automatic. I choose peace over performance. I detach not to punish, but to protect. And in that protection, I feel powerful, safe, whole. My energy is not public property. My emotions are not for manipulation. My presence is a privilege, not a default. And when someone shows they can't hold it with care, I don't lash out, I pull back. That's not avoidance, that's alignment. That's not passive, that's potent. That's the quiet clapback. And it echoes louder than any scream ever could. My silence speaks, my distance protects, my energy is sacred, and I decide who gets close. I do not argue, I do not chase. I choose peace, and I do not return to chaos. Chapter 8. Taking the power back without picking up the sword. You don't have to burn everything down to reclaim yourself. You don't have to scream. You don't have to prove a point. You don't even have to be seen. There's a version of power that doesn't require an audience, only awareness. And when you finally realize that, something inside you softens and strengthens. Because real power isn't about winning arguments. It's about no longer needing them. It's about reclaiming your energy from places it never belonged. It's about making quiet decisions that ripple through your nervous system like a calm but undeniable truth. I belong to me now. That's the moment you take your power back. Not with fire, with choice, with clarity, with the calm refusal to hand your peace to people who confuse chaos with closeness. You don't pick up the sword. You simply stop bleeding for battles that aren't yours. The idea that power must be forceful is part of the programming, that only those who fight hardest deserve to feel strong. But some of the strongest people walk away quietly. They reclaim their time, their peace, their space, not through revenge, but through realignment. They speak less and live more. They stop over-explaining and start protecting, because when you realize your worth doesn't live in someone else's reaction, you don't need to be louder. Your truth doesn't have to shout. It just needs to stand. And when it does, you'll feel it. Not in your fists, but in your spine, in your breath, in the way you no longer rush to fix what someone else broke. That's the sword you used to carry, the belief that you had to heal everyone just to stay whole. You don't carry that anymore. Taking your power back is not about becoming unkind, it's about becoming unavailable for the dynamics that drain you. You stop accepting guilt as a form of love. You stop confusing suffering with loyalty. You stop participating in cycles where you give endlessly just to earn what should have been given freely. And that shift? It's not aggressive, it's internal. You don't make a scene. You make a boundary. You don't attack, you exit. You don't punish, you protect. That's not weakness, that's mastery. That's you remembering that your energy is not up for negotiation, that you don't need to mirror someone's dysfunction just to feel heard. You simply decide, I'm no longer available for conversations that cost me my peace. And that decision changes everything. You begin to notice the people who thrived on your over-explaining, the ones who got used to your emotional labor, the ones who now feel distant, not because you shut them out, but because you stopped carrying what was never yours. That's the recalibration. That's the discomfort of becoming sovereign. And yes, it might feel lonely, but it's a sacred kind of loneliness. The kind that holds space for the new, the kind that teaches you, not everyone is meant to come with you. And that's okay. Because this version of you doesn't need to be surrounded to feel solid. You're not fueled by approval. You're rooted in alignment. You're not fed by drama. You're nourished by peace. That's power. That's taking back everything they convinced you to give away, and doing it with grace. So today, let your breath be your weapon. Let your silence be your strength. Let your decision to protect your peace be your power move. You don't have to prove that you've healed. You don't have to show that you're unbothered. You just have to live from within. That's the new power, the kind that doesn't perform, the kind that doesn't react, the kind that doesn't cut, just closes. With love, with clarity, with finality. You've carried enough swords in your life. It's time to carry something softer now, something stronger, yourself. I reclaim my power quietly, I do not fight to be seen. I do not argue to be understood. I protect my peace with presence, not pain. My calm is my comeback. Chapter 9. The grace of knowing what to ignore. Not everything deserves a response. Not every comment needs correcting. Not every slight requires explanation. This isn't passivity, it's preservation. Because there is power in silence. Not the silence of repression, but the silence of discernment. The silence that knows when engagement costs more than it's worth. You begin to understand this the moment your healing deepens, when your nervous system gets tired of overreacting to things that don't feed your peace, when you stop responding to every low-level provocation just because you can. This is the grace of knowing what to ignore. The emotional maturity to ask, does this need my energy or just my awareness? Not everything that provokes you deserves your voice. Some things only need a pause, then your absence. That's not weakness. That's evolution. You weren't always like this. There was a time you explained everything, defended everything, reacted to everything, because you were still trying to be understood, still trying to be seen, still trying to prove you were good, kind, fair, honest. And when someone accused you, misread you, twisted your words, you responded, not just with words, but with your whole being. But over time you learned that some people provoke not for clarity, but for chaos, that some conversations exist only to pull you back into your old programming, that the more you respond, the more you leak. So now, you don't leak, you listen. You don't take the bait, you take the breath, you don't jump in. You stay still. Because when you're anchored in yourself, ignoring something isn't avoidance, it's strategy. This isn't about bypassing your feelings. You're still allowed to feel what you feel, the tension, the frustration, the flash of anger. But now you let it pass through, not pull you under. You observe your trigger instead of becoming it. You create space between stimulus and response, and in that space you grow. You realize, just because I could clap back doesn't mean I should. Because every response is an investment, every engagement is a transaction, and some responses bankrupt your peace. So instead of saying the thing you'll regret, or typing the message you'll reread 10 times, or replaying the conversation in your head, you breathe. You say nothing. You let the silence speak for you. That silence, it's not empty. It's informed. It's in this chapter of your life that you start choosing what deserves your full presence. You stop feeling responsible for correcting every misconception. You stop lowering yourself to meet people in pettiness. You rise, not by towering over them, but by not stooping at all. You're no longer impressed by drama. You're no longer pulled by every emotional current. You've built a home inside yourself, and not every knock on the door gets answered. Some get silence, some get space, some get nothing but your unbothered energy moving on. That's emotional grace. Not polished performance, but sacred restraint. You don't fight for dignity anymore, you embody it. And when someone tries to pull you out of that dignity, you don't react, you reroute. So today, repeat this softly. I don't respond to everything that calls me. I choose what holds me. I honor my energy. I protect my breath. I decide what's worth it. And most of all, I remember that ignoring something doesn't mean I'm weak. It means I'm wise. I don't waste my life arguing about things that do not reflect my truth. I let the world misunderstand me when necessary. I let others stay committed to their confusion, and I trust that my silence, my absence, my refusal will say more than any well-crafted clapback ever could. That's grace. That's clarity. That's peace in motion. I choose where my energy goes. I don't react to noise. I don't respond to nonsense. My silence is sacred. My restraint is power. And I honor my peace above performance. Chapter 10. Forgiving yourself for falling for the pattern. It's easy to spot the pattern once you're on the other side. It's easy to say, I should have known better. I saw the signs. I felt it. And maybe you did. Maybe your body whispered. Maybe your chest tightened. Maybe your spirit tried to speak. But you stayed. You stayed because the pattern felt familiar. And familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. So now, as you look back at the moments you ignored, the boundaries you softened, the truth you bent to hold on, there's a voice rising that says, how could I fall for it again? And here is your answer. You didn't fall because you were foolish. You fell because you were human. Because love still lived inside you. Because hope hadn't yet hardened. Because you believed you could make it different this time. That's not shameful. That's honest. And honesty is where forgiveness begins. You can't heal what you keep punishing. You can't reclaim what you keep resenting. And the most powerful healing isn't in confronting them. It's in forgiving you. Not because you did something wrong, but because you've been carrying the weight of choices made from survival. You adapted. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You made excuses because the truth felt too heavy to hold. You gave grace because that's what you were taught love should look like. But now, you know that love without respect is not grace. It's self-erasure. And yet, you did what you could with what you knew. And now that you know more, you're doing differently. That's not weakness, that's evolution. And it deserves compassion, not criticism. There is a version of you, past you, who was just trying to feel safe, trying to feel seen, trying to feel chosen. She didn't have all the language, she didn't yet have the boundaries, but she showed up. She gave her heart. She kept trying, and it's time to stop treating her like the enemy. It's time to stop calling her naive, foolish, or embarrassing. Because that version of you, she was the bridge, the one who had to walk through confusion so that clarity could finally land, the one who held the line until you were ready to draw a new one. You are not where you are in spite of her. You are here because of her. And she doesn't need your judgment, she needs your love. Let that love be the new language you speak when self-blame tries to rise. Forgiveness is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a soft returning, a whispered, I understand why you didn't see it then, a gentle, you did the best you could with the tools you had. And when that voice of regret gets loud, you meet it with remembrance. That was then, this is now. The pattern no longer owns you. Because you see it, you feel it, and you no longer confuse it with passion, fate, or loyalty. That's power. Quiet power, not in rejecting the past, but in integrating it. That's the moment when you stop flinching at your reflection, when you stop avoiding the memory, when you stop performing perfection and start embodying forgiveness. Real forgiveness. The kind that doesn't mean forgetting. The kind that means, I remember and I love myself anyway. So today, breathe this into your being. I forgive the version of me who didn't know. I forgive the one who made choices from fear, from hope, from hunger, from habit. I no longer punish her. I no longer name her weak. She carried me here. She is sacred. And I let her rest. I hold her in grace. And from that grace I rise, not ashamed of where I've been, but proud of how I've learned. I do not repeat the pattern. I rewrite it. I do not run from my past. I hold it gently and I walk forward, free, whole, and finally, forgiven. I forgive the old version of me. I release the shame of what I didn't yet know. I hold my past with love, and I honor the wisdom it gave me. Chapter 11. Rewriting the script. You're no longer an option. There's a version of the script where you were always the one waiting to be called, waiting to be seen, waiting to be enough. You didn't write this role, but you learned how to play it. You got good at it. You played the supportive one, the flexible one, the one who didn't ask for too much. You watched others get chosen while you stayed on standby, telling yourself, just be patient, be pleasant, be available. And when you were finally noticed, you mistook the attention for value. But now, the illusion has cracked. The role no longer fits. The waiting no longer feels holy, it feels humiliating. And that voice inside you, once a whisper, is now a steady truth. I am no longer an option. I am not waiting to be picked. I am rewriting this script. The people who kept you as an option never lacked clarity. They lacked commitment. They saw your worth. They just knew you hadn't fully claimed it yet. And as long as you were unsure, they kept circling, not because they wanted to stay, but because they liked the comfort of knowing you were there. But you're not there anymore. You're not holding space for people who only show up when it's convenient. You're not staying soft just to stay included. You're not shrinking your needs to avoid being too much. That version of you, the one who tolerated half love, who explained her worth, who waited to be chosen, she's not gone because she failed. She's gone because you outgrew her. And now, you don't wait, you walk. Rewriting the script doesn't mean you become hard, it means you become honest. You no longer pretend that breadcrumbs are enough. You no longer let silence confuse you into staying. You no longer call inconsistency mystery or half-effort busy. You see clearly now. You see how long you mistook availability for affection, how long you kept the door open to people who only knocked when they needed comfort, validation, or escape. But now your home has new rules. You no longer let people in just because they ask nicely. You ask yourself, do they respect my space? Do they reciprocate my energy? Do they show up even when it's not convenient? If the answer is no, they're no longer in the story, not because you hate them, but because you love yourself. This shift won't be easy at first. You'll miss the illusion, the high of being noticed, even if briefly, the comfort of being needed, even if not deeply. But stay with it. Stay with the discomfort of being your own first choice, because what replaces the pattern is something stronger than the performance. It's peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to prove. You'll find relationships that don't require you to beg for clarity. You'll find love that doesn't feel like a performance review. You'll attract people who recognize your worth before you have to defend it, not because you're luckier, but because your script now reads differently. It doesn't say, will they pick me? It says, do they match the life I'm writing now? So today, let this land. I am no longer an option. I am not waiting for half love. I am not clinging to uncertainty. I am not performing for inclusion. I am writing a new role, one where my presence is not a placeholder, where my energy is not an afterthought, where my truth is not negotiable. I release the old script. I forgive myself for following it. And I begin again, not as someone hoping to be chosen, but as someone who has already chosen themselves. That is not ego, that is alignment. That is the story now. And it begins with one clear, quiet sentence. I am not an option. I am the whole truth. I release the old role of waiting. I choose myself fully. I no longer ask to be chosen. I live as someone who already knows their worth. Chapter 12. Walking away is a whole language. Walking away isn't just an action, it's a sentence, a boundary, a full declaration without words. Because there are things you say with your silence that you could never say loud enough to be heard by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You don't walk away to prove a point. You walk away when the point has already been made. Too many times. And still, nothing changed. You walk away because staying would require betraying yourself again, because explaining it again would cost you the last of your peace, because the version of you who stayed too long is no longer in charge. Walking away isn't failure, it's fluency. It's knowing how to speak the language of enough. Enough second chances, enough waiting, enough shrinking, enough of them not changing, enough of you finally choosing. There was a time when walking away felt like giving up, like quitting, like abandonment, because you were taught that real love stays, that strength means holding on, that loyalty means enduring, even when it hurts. So you tried. You stayed through things your soul whispered against. You stayed through inconsistency, disrespect, silence, manipulation. You called it patience. You called it forgiveness, but now you call it what it was, conditioning, the training to tolerate what you never deserved. And now, walking away doesn't feel like quitting, it feels like waking up. You see the difference between discomfort that grows you and pain that slowly destroys you. You see the way your spirit lifts when you finally listen. And that moment, that shift, that soft exit, that's when your voice comes back, not in yelling, but in walking. There is a grace to walking away that doesn't look impressive, but feels clean. You don't slam doors, you don't announce your departure, you just leave. Emotionally, energetically, spiritually. You stop explaining. You stop waiting for understanding. You stop chasing closure in conversations that only ever reopened wounds. Walking away is the closure. You no longer need permission. You no longer need to be validated. You no longer need to justify your boundary with a list of their offenses. You let your absence speak, and it does. Because when your energy pulls back, people feel it. When your presence disappears, the gap speaks volumes. That's when they might realize you were the calm in the chaos, the depth in the room, the truth they never honored. And by then, you're already gone, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. Walking away also means walking toward peace, toward your center, toward environments where your softness isn't taken as weakness, where your no isn't challenged, where your intuition isn't debated. You begin to attract what mirrors your healing, not your wounds. You begin to build your life from clarity, not survival. And when you do that, your body changes. Your sleep deepens, your thoughts quiet, your boundaries soften, not because they're weak, but because they're no longer under attack. You walk lighter, you move freer, because you're no longer carrying the weight of trying to make something work that only worked when you made all the sacrifices. That's the difference. You're no longer the one doing all the emotional labor. You've returned to yourself. And that return, that's what walking away was always about. So today, take this truth with you gently. Walking away is a whole language, and I speak it now. I speak it through peace, not panic, through stillness, not spite. I don't need them to understand. I don't need to announce it. I don't need to prove that I'm done. I just am. And in that quiet leaving, I reclaim the most sacred thing I have, my energy, my attention, my presence. I no longer place myself where I am not honored. I no longer stay where I must beg to be understood. I do not wait for closure. I walk. That is my healing. That is my homecoming. That is my full sentence. I am done and am finally free. I speak the language of walking away. I release what no longer holds me in respect. I don't explain my exit. I honor it with peace, clarity, and truth. Chapter 13. Quiet confidence is the final clapback. They expected a reaction, a meltdown, a post, a warning shot, something to prove they still had power, that they still occupied space in your mind, your body, your voice. But what they got was nothing. Not because you didn't feel it, not because you weren't tempted, but because you realized your energy was too expensive to spend on anyone who fed off your disturbance. That shift, the choice to stay grounded instead of engaged, that was the clapback. Not your pain, not your anger, but your presence, because there is nothing louder than someone who doesn't need to say a word to show that they've healed. And when you move in quiet confidence, everything about you changes, your walk, your breath, your boundaries, not to prove anything, but because you know who you are, and that knowing needs no audience. Quiet confidence isn't arrogance. It's not icy, it's not performative, it's not the puffed chest or sharp comebacks. It's what happens when you stop living in response to other people's projections. It's what rises when you no longer explain your worth, defend your softness, or shrink for acceptance. You know who you are, even when others pretend not to see you. You're rooted, even when others try to shake you. You're calm, not because life got easier, but because you got clearer. Clearer about what's yours to carry, clearer about what you won't entertain, clearer about the difference between presence and performance. And that clarity, it becomes your frequency. People feel it when you enter the room. They feel it in the way you take up space without apology. That's the final clapback, not the storm, but the stillness. When you're rooted in quiet confidence, you no longer rely on validation to stand tall. Compliments feel nice, but they don't build you. Criticism might sting, but it doesn't collapse you. Because your worth no longer swings on someone else's opinion. You know how far you've come. You know what it cost to reclaim your voice. You know how many times you swallowed truth just to keep peace. And now that you don't do that anymore, you walk lighter, you respond slower. You no longer flinch when misunderstood. You trust that what's real will remain, and what falls away was never meant to stay. That kind of confidence doesn't always make you popular, but it will always make you whole. And wholeness is louder than any reaction could ever be. The beautiful thing about quiet confidence is that it builds a new relationship with yourself, one where you are no longer your biggest critic, but your deepest ally. One where you look in the mirror and say, "We've got this," even if no one else claps. One where your power doesn't come from pushing, but from knowing, from choosing, from walking away without flinching, from staying soft without apologizing. And the people who are meant for you, they feel that frequency. They don't test your boundaries, they respect them. They don't need you to dim to stay connected. They meet you in your light. Because when you embody quiet confidence, you stop attracting from your wounds. You begin to attract from your healed self. And the healed version of you doesn't change. So today, let this settle deep. My silence is power. My stillness is proof. My grounded presence is the loudest thing in the room. I don't need to react to be seen. I don't need to prove to be valid. I don't need to defend what I already know is true. I carry myself with quiet confidence, not to impress, but to honor the version of me who fought to become this rooted, this soft, this clear. And when they wonder why I didn't react, the answer is simple. Because I didn't need to. My peace is the final word. I move in quiet confidence. I do not perform. I do not explain. I carry truth in my breath, power in my stillness, and peace in my pace. Chapter 14. You're not cold. You're clear. They might say you've changed, that you're distant now, that you don't care like you used to. But what they're really saying is, you've stopped making your boundaries negotiable. You've stopped softening every no. You've stopped showing up for people who disappeared when you needed them. You're not cold. You're clear. And clarity looks unfamiliar to those who only knew you in your confusion. You used to second-guess everything. You used to stay in conversations that drained you, in rooms that didn't feel safe, in roles that never honored you. Now, you pause. Now, you listen. Now, you choose with intention. That choice feels like distance to them, But to you, it feels like peace. Because the version of you they remember was constantly stretching, reaching, apologizing. The version you've stepped into now, she's anchored, she's whole, and she no longer bleeds for what can't hold her. You were trained to see your softness as currency, to stay emotionally available even when it hurt. You gave explanations when they weren't owed. You gave grace where you needed accountability. You gave time, attention, empathy, until there was barely anything left for yourself. And still, they called you difficult when you began to pull back. When you said, "This no longer feels right," when you stopped entertaining dynamics that used your kindness like a doormat. And that's when the label came, cold. But here's the truth they won't say out loud. You became clear, and your clarity made them uncomfortable, because it meant they could no longer access you in the same unguarded way. It meant you no longer gave away parts of yourself just to feel safe. That's not detachment. That's discipline. That's you deciding what gets your energy and what no longer does. Clear doesn't mean emotionless. You still feel everything. But you no longer let those feelings control your decisions. You still care deeply, but now you care with boundaries. You love with discernment. You stay soft without staying stuck. And that balance, that's what makes you powerful. Because the old you gave access to anyone who showed interest. The current you asks, have they earned my consistency? Not because you're playing games, but because you've played yourself for too long, and you're done with that. You no longer confuse being agreeable with being loving. You no longer twist yourself to make other people comfortable. You've learned that discomfort is the cost of alignment, and you're willing to pay it. Not with anger, with truth. Some will misunderstand, let them. Some will say you're different now, say thank you. You didn't survive what you did just to stay emotionally porous. You didn't unlearn decades of people-pleasing just to slide back into apology. You didn't cry all those tears just to keep tolerating what never honored you. You came this far to see clearly, and once you do, you can't unsee. You can't unread the text of your own healing. You can't go back to softening your no just to be seen as polite. You can't go back to the version of you who thought silence was love and sacrifice was safety. That version is at peace now. She's resting. And the you that stands here today? She's not colder, she's clearer. She knows who she is, and she no longer gives people instructions on how to treat her. She shows them, by how she moves, by how she stays silent, by how she leaves when necessary. So today, repeat this with presence. I am not cold. I am clear. I speak calmly, I move with intention, I feel deeply, but I no longer give freely to what drains me. I am soft, but I am not naive. I am kind, but I am no longer compliant. I do not perform warmth for people who earned my distance, and I no longer explain my evolution to those who refuse to evolve with me. My clarity is my boundary, my silence is my response, and my life, now rooted in peace, is the loudest confirmation that I chose myself. Fully, I am not cold, I am clear. I honor my energy, I protect my softness. I give with care, not compulsion. And I walk in truth, not performance. Chapter 15. When peace becomes the loudest sound in the room. You used to walk into rooms looking for safety, for signs that you belonged, for cues on who to be, how much to say, how little to feel. You scanned for energy shifts, you checked your tone, you monitored your volume, you made yourself digestible, small, selectively visible. But now, you enter differently, not because you say more, but because you need less. Your peace walks in with you. It sets the tone, it fills the room, and without trying, without explaining, without shrinking, it speaks. It says, I no longer bend to be included. I no longer chase connection that costs me myself. I am here because I belong to me first. And that presence, it's louder than any performance. Because when you carry peace, real peace, internal peace, it doesn't just soften the room, it shifts it. This peace wasn't handed to you. You built it, brick by brick, breath by breath, through disappointment, through boundaries, through the gentle destruction of everything that was once mistaken for love. You grieved, you released, you walked away, and every time you did, you made space. Space for stillness, for knowing, for self-honoring. Now peace is no longer a destination. It's the place you return to when the world tries to pull you back into reaction. It's the pause before the text you don't send. It's the quiet after the apology you never received. It's the exhale when you stop trying to fix what was never yours to hold. And when people try to disturb it, with blame, with guilt, with projection, you don't fight them. You stay still, because peace, real peace, doesn't argue. It simply stays. Peace isn't passive. It's a decision, it's restraint, it's presence. It's the sacred practice of protecting your nervous system in a world that profits from your urgency. It's the awareness that not every conversation needs closure. Not every person deserves access. Not every invitation is aligned. And now, you don't just know that. You live it. You say no without panic. You let people leave without begging. You let silence stretch without rushing to fill it. And when your peace is challenged, you don't abandon it, you return to it. That return becomes your rhythm. You're no longer addicted to noise, to being liked, to being understood. You've traded the adrenaline of approval for the deep, steady pulse of presence. And that pulse? That's your power. That's your home. Others will feel it before they understand it. They'll feel the weight of your stillness, the quiet strength of someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to make a point, the silent boundaries of someone who doesn't allow energy to pass through unchecked. Some will be drawn in, others will step back. Let both happen, because your peace isn't here to perform. It's here to protect, to invite only what is true, clean, mutual. And when someone can't match that frequency, you don't fix it. You don't shrink. You let them exit, because peace doesn't need everyone to stay. It only needs you to stay with yourself, fully, calmly, unapologetically. That's the loudest thing in the room. The person who speaks with presence, not noise. The person who doesn't seek control, because they already hold clarity. So now, breathe into this final truth. My peace is my power. My stillness is my voice. My boundaries are silent, but they speak clearly. I no longer chase, react, or perform. I carry peace. Not as decoration, but as identity. And from this place, I choose who I engage. I choose how I respond. I choose what I allow. I do not explain my calm, I embody it. I do not prove my growth, I live it. And I do not fear silence, because silence is where I meet myself most clearly. I am home now, not in anyone else's version of me, but in the peaceful presence I fought so gently to become. Peace is not something I find, it is who I've become. I walk in clarity, I speak with presence, I move with grace, and in every space, my stillness says more than words ever could.